grew up in Billings. I went to church my whole life. I was raised in a different church than I go to now, but I pretty much read my Bible my whole life too. I wrote journals to God every single day. Most of them, I love that saying that's out now that says the struggle is real. That was my, the majority of my life was the struggle is real, especially when I was young. I had suffered from, I was really sick all the time, and I suffered from severe depression that was never talked about or addressed. And I cried in my room every single night, writing that to God. That pretty much was probably the first 17 years of my life. When I was 17 in 1981, the summer before my senior year, I met my husband, John. And it was probably the first time I felt loved. I actually felt loved by someone just for who I was. That doesn't mean my parents didn't love me. It was just this different kind of love that I had never felt before. I didn't date in high school. I was struggle with what I looked like. Then I graduated high school in 1982. Went to cosmetology school, and I moved to Bozeman to be a hairdresser up there. And I lived there for about a year and a half, and still struggling with depression. And I was hit by a drunk driver. I was a pedestrian, and I was pinched between, I was standing on the outside of a pickup, and another pickup came by, and I broke my pelvis in a couple of places and sprained my back and pulled some ligaments in my knee. So it was a really, really long couple years. I had to move back home with my parents, which was really hard. And I still, the depression kind of got laid to the side just because the pain became greater than the depression. But that was just one of probably 9 surgeries I've had in the last 52 years. But that one I didn't even have a surgery. But it was just a really, really difficult time. A year after that, I married my husband, and I was just told I had to wait 3 years to have kids, which was really hard because I always, even before I got married, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have that white picket fence, I'm going to have those 3 kids, this is going to be awesome. And we were just dealt with the blow of, hey, you're just going to have to wait, and when you do, you'll be in bed for 9 months, which at that time was a really big deal for my spirit. But the whole time, so I'm already up to the age of 21, the whole time, I never, ever, ever stopped journaling, reading my Bible, going to church, praying, and just searching for that one thing. Now, I also searched in other ways. I searched by food and exercise and just all the self-help books that you could think of. But when I got to the age of 30 to 35, I call them my black years. I literally wanted to commit suicide every day. I would just dream about driving off the rims. I lived in Billings. I would dream about ways to run into a pole, any way I could without hurting somebody else. That was my life every day. I had about 5 days in those 5 years that were, I felt that it was okay to be alive. But lucky, because the religion I grew up in said if you did that, you would go to hell. And I was already in hell, and I was like, there is no way. If it's worse than this, forget it. I hadn't wanted to have nothing to do with it. So this takes me up to the age of 35. At the age of 36, something starts to lift for me. First time in my spirit ever experienced 1 ounce of joy in the way that I think most people, I know some people don't experience it, and if you suffer from depression, I'm so sorry. But this was the first time in my life that I thought, oh my gosh, I probably should have had kids. I don't think I've ever told a crowd this, but I decided not to have kids. 1, because my husband never said, hey, we should have a child. Second of all, there was no way I was going to pass on this depression. Life for me was not fun, good, joyful, and I felt like the responsibility of that's just me. I'm not saying that about anybody else, just me. The responsibility of passing that on and having another person have to deal with that was just too much for me. So me and my husband did not have kids. I have tons of spiritual kids now, tons. A bunch of amazing people. But and my husband is every day, he's like, number 97, reason of why we don't have kids. He's very happy. We don't have, I have friends that say that some days if they're really being honest. But that time that my spirit started to lift, I knew God was doing something inside of me, and I started going to a different church. I started reading my Bible, and it was something literally underneath my skin was happening. And it took me about, I'm a recovering control freak, but at this time I was a master, and I will guarantee you I could take anybody on as far as control goes. But took me about a week, and I finally, after 36 years, opened my arms and literally fired myself and made Jesus the boss of my life. Best decision I ever had made. Now, I found journals of myself when I was 12, when I was 17, when I was 20, saying the exact same things that I said that day. Lord, I give you control of my life. But something happened this day. Something shifted inside of my soul, and it was crazy. I waited about 2 weeks, and I didn't tell my husband. Then I told my husband, and then I just let it all out. I let the word start working in me. I cussed like a sailor, and I would read, God would prefer me not to swear. I drank like a sailor, and had lots of drunkenness, and I read that wasn't in God's will for me. I was angry, and I had a lot of people to forgive, and God, he's my boss, so he's telling me to forgive, so I have to do that. But there were also some cool things, like he was telling me not to feel guilty anymore. Who hasn't experienced 24/7 guilt? And so there were so many things that I was learning. The same Bible I had read my whole life was all of a sudden, because the Spirit was in me, was bringing on this new life to me. But my husband was looking at me like, what is going on with you? And he began to start examining himself, because he thought, well, I believe in Jesus too. And so he started to catch a little bit more on fire, and we just started to just have Jesus be the center of our marriage, and it was starting to be completely different. The problem is you're still yourself, and I'm still a control freak. I just have Jesus. But in 2001, we moved to Bozeman, which I left everything. My identity, I was a jewelry designer. I had friends. My parents lived there. I was so finally, for the first time, so comfortable and so happy. But because I was under Jesus, and he was telling me to encourage my husband, I did that. And it ended up being the best thing I could ever do. But I began to re-identify myself. I was lost. I was like, who am I? Even though I had the joy of Jesus, knowing I was a child of the King, I still I'd look around, even though it was only 2 hours away from Billings. I don't know if you've ever moved, but even then, you can't have those daily contact with the people that you love the most. So I just really started working on myself. And the one thing, after about a year, that God really started pressing into me, and I hadn't heard very much talked about, was how controlling I was, me being the leader of my household. How many of you are the leaders of your household? Well, I wore the pants, I wore the shirt, I wore the tie. I was completely 100% the leader of my household. And God started pressing in on me. And I just I hadn't read a ton. Of course, I skipped those parts of my Bible or something, because I hadn't read a ton about it, and I hadn't heard it preached a whole bunch. And you have to know this about my husband. I married my husband for one of the biggest reasons is because he was so darn flexible. Yeah. Total backfire after you get married. Because me being control freak, him being flexible, and here's where it gets not so funny, I totally squashed his spirit. I totally, completely changed who he would have been as a man. I can't ever get that back, but I started to work on it. I started to ask for his forgiveness. And we added formal forgiveness to our family at this time, which drove my husband nuts. But every day I would remember something else I controlled, and I would say, hey, hon, will you forgive me, and can you tell me how I hurt you? Because I got sick of just saying sorry and not having a conversation about it. So formal forgiveness in our house, that's what it looks like. And in the beginning, he didn't want to do it, and now we practice it all the time, and it's amazing because then you really have to stop and look at the person. You can't just say sorry and walk away. You have to sit there if the person desires and tell you how they've hurt you. So that's worked really well for our family. But I was so angry that John was so passive. I called it passive. That probably wasn't fair of me, but that's what it felt like to me. But all that was going, I was telling myself, I have to stay in the lead. How is this guy ever going to figure this out? So I started stop being his Holy Spirit. And it was weird because sometimes nothing, okay, so here's my reasons, the lies that I would tell myself that I didn't want to give up the leadership. And he even agreed with them, some of them. I thought nothing would get done. I thought it wouldn't get done right if it did get done. I'd become a doormat. None of his decisions would benefit me. And to be honest with you, I was just completely afraid of the unknown. We had never run our marriage like that. Now, don't get me wrong, I had a pretty good marriage, even though I'm making it sound like it was horrible. He doesn't even remember me being that much of a control freak. But there are people around me that know and could tell you and would swear how much of a control freak I was. He's just so flexible. Doesn't bother him. So after about 6 months of just complete surrender and forgiveness, and God performing the hugest miracle in me ever, I sat John down and said, I'm not going to lead this house anymore. I'm not going to do it. I don't know what you're going to do with that. That was the biggest part. I decided that I couldn't have any expectations of him leading. That took me like 6 months to get to that conclusion. And John just looked at me wide-eyed and was just like, you're way better at this than I am. And I said, it's not about that anymore. This is what God's calling me to do, and this is what I'm going to do. In Ephesians 5:23, it says, for the husband is the head of the wife. Now, for years I read that, but I say I made him the head, the leader. I never noticed that it said he is. So if you're married and you follow Christ and your husband follows Christ, he's your leader whether he acts like it or not. And I had to treat him like that. Whether he picked up the ball or didn't change one thing, I had to do it. God was asking me to do it. At that point, I don't know what he was asking John to do. I just knew what he was asking me to do, and I couldn't live with myself anymore. And the reason that it was so cool was I literally knew God was performing a miracle because I didn't have any expectations. Now, it got a little weird when we had to make some decisions like, okay, are we going to go to this family reunion or not? And I made the decisions where we went to dinner, if we went on a date with someone, if we got together with someone, except we went fishing every Friday since I moved to Bozeman, so I'm not being completely honest there. That killed me too. To go play for a whole day every week. Oh my gosh, I would just die thinking someone could probably use a meal or somebody could probably this, that, or the other thing, and it was always, let's just go fish for the whole day. And I'm like, okay. Now we do it, and it's a blast. But that was not, since I gave up being his Holy Spirit, and I told him that nothing in our marriage ever, ever, ever was the same. I had to learn to sit back and listen. How many of you can, if there's something you're deciding or something, or a conclusion you're going to come to, and you can come to it like that, and you just throw it out there. Well, I did that our whole marriage, 15 years of marriage, and to just sit back and wait for him to answer, I'd be like, still to this day, I just like, sometimes I'm just, he just runs on a whole different pace than I do. But just because I did that didn't mean it was right. That was so disrespectful. That was really intentional once I knew what I was doing, and disrespectful. I learned a ton about respect. Some of the things that I learned how to respect John are funny and some of them aren't, but the lightest one is probably the toothpaste tube. I squeeze from the middle, he squeezes from the bottom. So what are you going to do? We just got 2 tubes of toothpaste in two separate spots. That one was easy. John hated me to leave the front porch light on. I love driving by a house and seeing the front porch light. And so I'd turn it on all the time, just totally disregarding his wish. until God started doing this. John would call me up and say, hey, I forgot to set the sprinklers. Will you set the sprinklers? Set them for 15 minutes. I'd get off the phone. Oh my gosh, they need 30. Again, disrespectful. Subliminal, and he never would have known, but definitely disrespectful. Oh, he always put gas in my car and kept the cars clean, and I could get to work about 3 minutes faster if I took this one route. But there was a little bit of a dirt road, and he didn't want me to go on it. I can't tell you how many times I went on that road. And that makes me so sad today to think all I would have had to do was drive an extra 3 minutes and honor him, because honoring our husbands is huge to the Lord. I don't care if you know the Lord or not. Men want respect. And if we're disrespecting him in those little teeny ways, we're disrespecting him in other ways. I just started to examine all the ways I was disrespecting him. Somewhere along the way, the cool stuff that started happening was I started becoming more vulnerable and not so tough. Like, he just thought I could do everything and wanted to do everything, and I didn't. And the more I wanted to do everything, the less he looked like he was my leader. And I would disrespect him just even in my mind. Now we give each other the benefit of the doubt daily. We've become a team. If we have an argument or a conversation, it's, hey, I can approach him and say, hey, John, I don't know if this is you or I don't know if this is me, but something's not right here. Can we figure out which one of us needs to make a little shift? So that just stopped John from, I would say, you didn't take out the garbage. Oh my gosh, that would make it sound like I'm not making enough money. I didn't buy you this. I should have got you something more for Valentine's Day. He would hear all these things in that one little sentence of our garbage argument. Now I put our deal is I put the garbage in the middle of the room. Not as loud as I used to. How many of us do that? One day I found myself making a bed really loud while he was watching the football game. And I just started laughing like, oh my gosh, what? Because it was when I was working on all this, and God was just like, just go ask him to pause the game. But we don't want to ask for help either. That's our next problem. Now that we have all these problems, but now John and I put each other first. And being on the same team means I don't always get my way and he doesn't always get his way, but we both win. And we both really agree to that. That maybe this time we took a warm vacation, which I love. And maybe later we have to go on some fishing cold vacation. But it's a compromise. It has changed. The way I feel loved and cherished and honored and protected, I never gave him 1 ounce of an opportunity to protect me. I woke up like this every day, and I know a lot of women that do. I'm not saying you do, but I know a lot of women. We wake up, and I don't know what we're doing, but we have our boxing gloves on, and don't you dare try to come break this. I need it to be broken. So John and I, now, the cool thing about our marriage is every day, unless we need to settle something, we are 100% from the minute we met, which was 36 and a half years ago, to now, up to date on forgiveness. We don't go to bed carrying anything. And we talk about it all the time. We teach a lot on forgiveness too, so that does help. But that has just been a huge thing. So my marriage is better than I could have ever dreamt it could have been. We went through definitely the most hardest season in our marriage. I had to make a decision and John had to make a decision. And we worked at the same place, and we didn't agree with each other's decisions. It was really, really, really hard. But luckily, we had done so much work that we would do this. Like, I can't believe what you're doing, John. Well, I don't really like what you did either, Michele. But I really love you, and I really respect you. Let's go have dinner. I mean, it really became a daily thing that we didn't agree with each other, but we still loved and respected each other. And we had to learn how to communicate in that zone, and it was really hard, but I don't know what I would have done had I not had that team concept. I think it would have been really hard. So I'm going to give you a couple tips of how John and I got to a great marriage. And that doesn't mean we don't struggle, believe me. But I wouldn't trade my marriage for anybody's. I would not change a thing about my marriage. 1, Jesus. We invited Jesus into our marriage. It was a game changer. 2, formal forgiveness. Just being able to say, hey, hon, can you forgive me and can you tell me how I've hurt you? 3, just the surrendering the right to be right and have the answer really quick. And even with him, giving me some time and space. John had a hard wife. Hard life. The depression has still been with me, but it's been way better. I'm very, accident prone. I've had 9 surgeries, probably 4 or 5 in the last 7 years, whether I trip or just weird, really, really weird stuff. Had a migraine for 18 months straight, which came from a tumor that was on my ovary that my mom was dying of ovarian cancer, and so they just quickly took it out, but then that threw me into menopause, which threw me into the migraines. Tripped on basketball and fractured my bottom of my leg in 15 places. They never thought I'd even be normal again. This is the longest I've gone without a surgery. It's been 2.5 years. So yay. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I really know. The 4th thing was becoming a team. That was such a game changer for us to have that language and John not be. I just had to find a way and fight harder to find a way where he wasn't going to be defensive every time. In 36 years, John has never come to me once and said, we need to work on this. That makes me sound horrible, but I'm the one that has to do that. And that can get really lonely too. But now that we're a team, it's just so much easier. So 15 years of my marriage without Jesus and 17 with him. And there's no comparison. My best advice for anyone's marriage is to figure out where you're at spiritually and try not to judge where your husband is at spiritually. I thought I knew Jesus, and I just knew of him those 36 years. So I had to ask myself these questions, and I'm going to ask you, and you can ask yourself this. And if you want to come and talk afterwards with me, you're totally welcome to. Me or Holly, you can just talk to us. The first question I had to ask myself if I acknowledged that I was a sinner. The second was, did I believe that Jesus became sin and died on a cross just for me and you? Third is, did I believe that he rose from the dead, conquering the death, confirming that he is the Son of God? The 4th one is the thing that hooked me up all those times that I wrote to God because I wasn't ready to have him be my boss, but it is, have you repented of your past and embraced that Jesus is the boss of your life? That was the big changer for me. So that is the best advice, gift, and promise you will ever need to make it through anything, not just a marriage. And again, if you want to ask us any questions afterwards, please do. These are some of the things that I gained from letting John lead, or allowing him to lead, or fall into that role. Freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17 says the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. I was finally free from carrying all the burdens. I don't know if you know what that feels like, just to think you're carrying everything for your marriage. The second was protection. I got out of the way and John could protect me. The third was just experiencing a different kind of love, a deeper kind of love and respect for someone that I had been with for a really long time, and we were setting some patterns, and just to know that there was hope for any marriage was amazing. We desire to be together, play together, do projects together, cook together. It's funny how I kind of want to write a book about, in the beginning of the marriage where you're just ready to drop everything and do everything with your husband, and he's got all these other things going on. Well, just wait, because in the end, he wants to be with you every second. And you're just like, no, can you just please go fishing? I just want to be by myself. And he still totally doesn't get it. The only thing we don't do together is shop, because he's not good at that, and I'm really good at it. But not being in control finally brought me the change and just the joy that I was looking for, and it just allowed me the opportunity to respect my husband in a way I never thought I could. So I just want to dare everyone to try some of those things, and I dare you to make your marriage an A+ marriage. Thank you.
I'm going to make sure I'm not going to trip. I feel like this pole, I feel like there's something that's come between us. Like Maggie said, my name is Holly Hauskins, and my husband and I got married 16 years ago in Missouri and promptly left the next day for Helena, Montana. I never tire of telling people that I got to honeymoon on beautiful Interstate 90. So take that, you Aruba people. And 4 years ago, we relocated to Bozeman. We have 4 amazing daughters. They are 12, 11, 8, and 7. And I feel incredibly privileged to be here tonight. Words for Wives in Bozeman is a lifeline. I treasure it every month. And so wherever you are in your walk of faith, I make the assumption we all want a healthy marriage. And so I'm kind of excited as I look at this room and just think, a year from now, I'm going to be in a coffee shop somewhere just saying, that Great Falls Words for Wives is rocking, and I knew them when they were born. Tonight, I want to start off with a story from my own marriage. It happened 10 years ago, and the scars I still carry today. The scars, though, if you have scars, you know that they actually become beautiful after a while, and they are reminders of a place that I hope I never have to go back. Our oldest 2 daughters are 19 months apart, and after our second one was born, things were just a mess in our house. I was tired. I felt alone. I was crabby. I was out of control. I felt fat. You name it, I felt it. But the bottom line is I was empty. And I began to look to my husband to fix me and to fix all of it. And not surprisingly, he couldn't. He actually did make some effort. I do remember him getting up with the baby in the night so that I could stay asleep, but then when I would wake up and see him with the baby, I was actually mad he hadn't woke me up. He came home from work early on several occasions with the intent of helping me out, but I was kind of mad he hadn't called first, because that would have actually been helpful. And I can remember telling him, using these words as he tried to entertain our 19-month-old, "She doesn't like that. You're not doing it right." Right? So needless to say, and those of you who have been married a while can probably guess what happened next. He quit trying. And that made me feel alone and frustrated and angry, which in turn made him feel alone and frustrated and angry. And there are layers of this story that I need not share, but what is important is that one evening I was alone in our bedroom, sobbing and crying out to God, how could I be in this place? Just a few months ago, I loved that man. I loved my marriage, and I'm so angry. I was mad at Jared, and I was so mad at God. And as I cried, he clearly told me to choose what I wanted. Did I want to continue on like this, being right and playing on Team Holly? Or did I want to soften my heart and trust in my God and learn what it meant to play on Team Us? And I remember thinking, are you kidding me? I have 2 children under the age of 2. Shouldn't he be more helpful? Shouldn't he do something? Shouldn't he see my needs? Can't he see? And on I went, and God just kept gently bringing the conversation back to me. I will never change my husband. But there is quite a bit, come to find out, that I can change about me. And that is where it began. We refer to it in our marriage as our first State of the Union address. I called it. And I laid my heart out to this man. I told him how angry I was and how hurt. And I apologized for being too critical. I apologized to him for asking more of him than he was possibly capable of giving to me. And change began that night in our home. And this experience, ladies, I'm not joking when I tell you I carry it with me into every day of my marriage, because I could have ignored it. We probably would have marched on, coexisting side by side for years. We would have been perpetually disappointed in the other person. Our feelings would have been smushed down as we drifted further and further apart. But God gave me a choice. It was all mine to make. I could have kept focusing on all of my husband's faults, what he doesn't do, who he isn't. But God asked me to focus on the one person in my marriage I have control over. And when I think about my role in my marriage, I realize I probably have enough sin and baggage to keep me busy for quite a while. So on the day when I'm good to go, then maybe then he'll ask me to begin pointing out my husband's faults. But for now, we are busy. So ladies, we can't afford to live the lie any longer that if my husband would only do such and such, our marriage would be better. Nowhere in Scripture do we see Jesus saying to us, get up in the grill of your loved ones and make them love you better. Right? Instead, he spends all of his time calling individuals to him for change. The truth is, if left to my own devices, ladies, I will destroy my marriage. I have tone of voice issues you have never heard before. I have a propensity, Michelle, to need control. And I have been known to be critical of my husband. And before I married, I thought that marriages broke up because of catastrophic events, affairs, addictions, mother-in-laws. But what I now know is that if I don't guard my heart on the little things, they will plant their seed and grow, and eventually they will destroy us. The Bible actually addresses this, and what I love is that it specifically addresses the struggles of wives. Proverbs 14:1. A wise woman builds her home. A foolish woman tears it down with her own hands. A wise woman builds her home. A foolish woman tears it down with her own hands. Ladies, it begs the question, are we builders or are we terrors? Because God clearly says we're creators, right? We are either creating our home or we are tearing it down, and don't miss it, with no help, with our own two hands. This verse is powerful, ladies, because it shows that God has given us power. He has given us the power to build our house full of love and grace. But the same is true, that the power is in our hands to tear it down with criticism and frustration. It reminds me that it isn't about waiting for my husband to improve my marriage. It's about using the right tools to start improving it today. Now, at my worst, I tend to grab criticism and frustration rather than grabbing the tools that are required to coexist with someone, which is love and grace. And I admit to you that I can fall into a pattern of only seeing my husband's faults. What he doesn't do, what he forgets, who he isn't. And they start as innocent and totally justified. And then another one comes, and another one comes, and then he forgets to pick up milk on his way home from work, and we are done. Right? It is a wedge. But that wedge, if not forgiven, eventually causes a crack. And that crack eventually becomes permanent if I do not fix it. So for example, and you should know before I start, my husband reads everything I say. So he's fantastic, and I am not here, like he's cool with my stories. But he is chronically late. He doesn't try to be late, but what I really think the root is that I think he has a priority problem. So if he sees it, and he's like, oh, I'm just gonna fix that light bulb, with total disregard of why he walked into the room. So he is always late as a result of this. And I love to tell this story of one Sunday morning several years back. He actually was ready for church before I was. And he walked outside, and I was still inside. It is totally beside the point that we had 4 young children, and I wasn't inside eating chocolate, I can promise you that. But nonetheless, he walks outside to the car, and on this crisp fall day, thinks he's going to warm it up for his beautiful bride. But while he is walking to the minivan, he thinks, oh, I've been meaning to change the windshield wipers for weeks. I got some free time. Why don't I do it now? So it is 8:45 and church starts at 9. It is not raining. And he is changing the windshield wipers on our minivan. We did not arrive at church on time that day. And it would be awesome if the concept of being late versus being on time came up once or twice in 16 years. Turns out it comes up almost every single day. It always comes up on Sundays. So my gut reaction is to nag, and you're the reason we're late, and I wish I could hold a sign up so that everybody in the worship room would know that you're the reason we're late, and I was ready on time. Nag, nag, nag. And you know what I think God sees? Rip, tear, because I am tearing my house down. Everyone in our family is silent and tense and angry as we go to worship the Lord Jesus. That, ladies, is not my goal. When I hand that over to Jesus, what I begin to see is that every Sunday morning I wake up to a man who wants to go to church. He drives me there. He actually volunteers in our children's ministry once a month. The man loves his Jesus. That's my goal, right? So sometimes I actually react to his mistakes when they are him, just being him, right? They're not sin. It is not sinful to be tardy every once in a while, right? But what is actually preferable to me is that he would be an extension of me, right? That he would just do things my way. Because I am efficient, ladies, and I have a plan. But not long ago, and by not long ago, ladies, I literally mean like 2 weeks ago, okay? So this is a work in progress. But I feel like God said to me, Holly, when I said that marriage is 2 people becoming one, I did not mean that the one person they become is you. And that is how my God speaks to me. And I was like, you're so right, but wouldn't it be great? Right? Now, the second thing I struggle with is giving my husband the benefit of the doubt. And to give someone the benefit of the doubt is for your first reaction to be a charitable judgment. To believe the very best of the person and to respond in a way that says, I know you were trying and I know that you love me. Why is it so hard to offer this to my husband? My neighbor's dog, and this is going somewhere, is 14 years old and has cancer. And that dog comes and poops in my front yard at least 3 or 4 times a week. And do you know that as I look out my front window, I think to myself, that poor dog has cancer. I'm not going to be picking this poop up very long. But my husband, on the other hand, the man who took a public vow to love me, the man who is an amazing father, who works long, hard hours so that I can stay at home, the funniest human being on the planet, the man who has gone to CVS in the middle of the night for medicine for me, who watches me cry the ugly cry and still wants to hold my hand in church, that man I do not give the benefit of the doubt to. I can clearly remember the night he surprised me by bringing home dinner to give me the night off at 5:30 at night. Now, I don't know what your day looks like, but by 5:30, ladies, I have probably already made dinner, right? And so instead of being like, that is so thoughtful, honey, and think to myself, I can just put tonight's dinner in the fridge, right, and have tomorrow night off too, what a man. Oh no, I turn around and look at him to say, are there many nights when I look at you, honey? And I just say, I have no idea what 6 people will be eating in 10 minutes. He's actually never done that again, right? Like, let's get the hand, rip, tear, rip. Why? Why do we do these things, right? I struggle to give him the benefit of the doubt when he says he'll be home at 6 and it's 6:45, right? And so when he comes home, I am slamming plates and an angry voice is out, and then he's just like, I'm sorry, there was a widow who didn't understand her financial statement, so I got caught up at work. Rip, tear, right? And why do I assume he wants to be at work? Right? Like, I don't know many people that are just like, shoot, gotta go home. Right? Like, he wants to be with us. But in that moment, because it didn't go my way, I think he looked at his watch at 6 o'clock and said, you know what? There is nothing more I love than my wife when she's a mess. So I'm just gonna hang out here and play solitaire on my computer until 6:45. Right? So thankfully, ladies, God has provided this foolish woman with all the tools that I need to become a wise woman, a woman who builds my home up. And it all happens in one short verse. 1 John 4:19 says, we love because he first loved us. Or in my head, it reads, we love our husbands well because he first loved us well. And the truth is, ladies, if we don't fully recognize how loved we are by our Heavenly Father, we will never have the ability to love others well. And so often when I read these scriptures, I immediately think of loving my neighbors well, right? Loving family members that I struggle with well. And those people matter, but I'm now convinced that if I cannot love my husband well, the man I vowed, the man on my innermost circle, like, I am never going to fully love outside people well either. It doesn't say we love because others love us well. And it certainly doesn't say we love because our husbands come home on time, right? No, we love only because he loves us well. Ladies, do you know how much our God loves you? Have you ever just sat with your eyes shut and let his love wash all over you? You, exactly as you are. Or do you believe that you are the exception to his love? Well, guess what? You don't have that much power. Only he is the creator of the universe, and only he gets to declare who he will love. And he says that you are his most prized possession. Oh, sometimes I just think he reaches down and he says to me, Holly, you are not exempt from my love. I see your sin and I see your weakness, but guess what? I made your every weakness. But I also put my son on that cross. So we will bring that and we will put it there and we will march forward because I have written your name on my hand. Oh, I love that, ladies. He died on the cross for us while we were still sinners. He's not surprised by my sin. I often think he's actually not surprised by the very scenario in which I have walked into. And I like to laugh about this. I don't actually have any biblical evidence of this, but sometimes I think he's up there and he's like, hey, Jesus, come here. Watch this. Right? Because he's never up there being like, son of a God, when will she change? No, he is up there cheering me on. Right? He wants me to choose a better way. He does, and he knows I can. But I can't unless I'm looking at him. He loves you. So I'm currently doing the Beth Moore Bible study on Esther. And in it, she uses a phrase that I hope is just branded on my heart. And it is that we should strive to be wholly secure. So not holy as in blameless, but holy as in entirely secure, right? We are daughters of the Most High God, and we should live our lives from a place of being wholly secure in that. This is what I think the wise woman knows. This is freedom, ladies. Because if I allow my value and my worth to be determined by my Heavenly Father, then there is never a reason to need someone to be perfect. There is never a reason to need my husband to bow to my every whim, because I am full up loved by my Jesus. When I forget my love from my Father, then I need Jared to love me perfectly. I need him to deliver on every promise. I need him to see my every hurt, see my every need, anticipate it, even ward it off for me. And it's actually odd if I step back and think that God would create me and then leave my value and my ability to feel whole in the hands of another man, right? In the hands of a sinner. It's not his job to fill me up. It is not my job to fill him up. And that is a treadmill, ladies, that we can't get off, right? And some of us, we don't put it on our husbands. Some of us find our value in how well our children behave, or how clean our house is, how big our house is, or how thin we are, or you name it. I think as a lady, I have tried to find my value in most anything the world will offer me. And it never works. It leaves me feeling alone and angry and frustrated. When I am wholly secure, I see my husband as a child of God. And I see him as someone who is also on a spiritual journey that may or may not have anything to do with me. He is forgiven by his God, and therefore he is worthy of my forgiveness. He has been shown grace by our God, and therefore he is worthy of mine. He's lovable because I am loved. I can see my husband through the lens of Christ. Ladies, my flesh wants, it might even need him to be perfect. But my heart knows at the end of the day, I want my imperfect husband standing right next to me. And that is the place where my hammer comes out and I start building my house out of love and grace. I will take him just the way he is, and we will figure it out. Now, my husband, he hates Valentine's Day. And before we were married, we were dating over a Valentine's Day, and he mentioned to a friend that it's a stupid holiday, and he doesn't feel like he should have to participate in it. And I overheard him. And so I immediately said, fine, we will never celebrate it. Never. Had no idea at the time that I would marry this man, which I may have rephrased that. But that year, we did not speak on the telephone, we did not go out to dinner, we did nothing, it just passed in silence. And for 15 years, that is what Valentine's Day has looked at in my house. So you stay tuned for my talk on stubbornness, because it will come someday. But last year, I woke up, and on our island, just this past February, was a card. And I thought to myself, an olive branch. Right? And I go, and I open my card. I have it with me here tonight. It says, Happy Valentine's Day to the woman that I love. And I'll just read the first page. I love you that you're my happy when I'm feeling blue. I love you that you're my helpful when there's way too much to do. And, you know, I just want to show it to you here, because you ladies on the front, do you notice anything about this card? So those are two ladies on the card. All right, to the woman I love. Every picture. There's more. Two women. All right. So he had no idea. Like, I took a picture of it, and he was already at work, and I was like, "Did you look at this card?" And then, of course, he comes home and he's like, honey, they should have signs for that in the Rose Hours aisle. Like, they didn't. They've got to help a brother out. Right? But I can tell you there have been times and seasons in my marriage when I would have gone immediately for the punch. Seriously? You can't even get Valentine's Day right? Right? My other friends are like out to dinner with their husbands, and like, you just had a card, you couldn't even read it, right? I could have gone there. But I didn't. I laughed, because you know what? My husband loves me, right? And I will never let him live this down. Gifts have never been his specialty. I have been gifted flies for a fly rod I don't own. For Christmas just last year, he bought me extra small fleece leggings. I am many things, but I am not an extra small. And I know that I'm growing, because my love from him, it's not determined by his gifts. My love bucket is full because Jesus loves me, right? Because I'm trying to operate from a place of being wholly secure, so that I can say, my husband thought of me on Valentine's Day, and he gambled. And it didn't entirely pay off this year, but maybe next year. The dream is still alive. The little things that frustrate me, they're going to always be there, right? Chances are he will always run late. He will always hunt too much. And he will never turn his socks right side out before he puts them in the laundry hamper. But somehow, through the lens of Christ, they just seem smaller, right? These aren't mountains to die on. These are molehills, right? And I'm freed up to see the best in my husband instead of focusing on the worst. So I am back to building with my tool chest. I love that man, and he ain't perfect. But you know what? Neither am I. And I like to think at the end of most days, I actually got the better end of the deal. For all of us, I think the first step to building our home is to use the right tools, to be wholly secure in our love from God. So I challenge you today, ladies, to ask God to show you how much he loves you. I cannot think of a prayer he would not rather answer, and quickly to say, oh, God, would you show me? Because I don't feel so very loved right now. We are women who are hurting. We are women who our value buckets are empty. We are overworked. We are overlooked. We're lonely. And I just want to let you know that God has something more for you. This isn't the end of the story for you or your marriage. He loves you. And he can't wait to look at us, I believe, and say, look at her. She loves well because she knows I love her. She has built her home with my love. So ladies, in the words of Home Depot, let's do this.
Thanks, Holly. I think I might get a little mini hammer at Home Depot and put it next to my bed as a reminder. I like that. We're going to move this table back. So we're going to do a quick Q&A, you guys. One of my favorite things at Words for Wives has been when there's a women's panel. And so we're going to use a couple of the questions. We did a live Q&A last night at our Words for Wives in Bozeman. And so we're going to do one here. And if there's anything that just strikes a chord with you with one of the questions where you want them to elaborate more, feel free to raise your hand, shout it out. If you have a question, and if we have time, if you guys have questions for them, we want you to ask, and feel free to ask. Days, in the year, like our seasons come and go, like I was saying earlier, and like day to day, like we're in these routines, and we don't really, we can't see what's next. For one, we're in uncharted waters all the time, and one thing I love about the Bible is it says multiple times, seek out wise counsel, seek out older women. So that's kind of the point of this. Again, there may be things that you hear that you're like, that wasn't for me, or, oh, I really like that, I want to write that down, or whatever, but just use your own wisdom and discernment to take what you want and leave what you don't. This isn't the end all be all life's questions concerning marriage. I gotta grab my phone.